guess where I went to lunch? Panera Bread.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
I know, because you just told me that.
True.
Used to love Panera Bread so much.
Yes. Same.
Give me a bread bowl with broccoli cheddar soup and their chicken salad sandwich any day. And yet, the last few times I've been kind of disappointed. And I know they've been going through it in terms of their identity. Like they're having this existential crisis or something with their menu.
Yeah. I don't know what happened. Pre-COVID, they decided, hey, we're going to serve pizza now. And then we're going to serve chicken sandwiches. And yeah, I don't know what all of that was about. But I agree with you that I also was getting annoyed at Panera. And I think when you and I were going on a road trip, we stopped at Panera and we were like, not great.
Right. Yes, we did.
Yeah.
I remember. And we were both like, man, Panera used to be so good.
Yes. Well, I went today, and I will say that I know they recently had overhauled their menu again, and I think they overhauled it in the right direction this time.
Ooh, okay. Tell me more.
And they went back to sandwiches. Yes.
Okay.
So, number one, so they have these new sandwiches that are toasted sandwiches, but I didn't mind it because I had a toasted caprese sandwich.
Ooh, I love a caprese sandwich.
And that was really good, which I was excited about because previously the only vegetarian sandwich on the menu was the Mediterranean veggie. So the fact that they added a vegetarian sandwich was very exciting to me. And it tasted really good. Because I got the pick too. And so then the other thing I got is they had this new fall harvest salad that was actually really delicious. It was lettuce and these like crispy beet strips and pumpkin seeds and a little farro and goat cheese.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I was pleasantly surprised. I felt it was like a throwback situation to Panera, I will say. It's definitely the best Panera situation I've had in years.
Okay, that's good. That's giving me hope. How was the portion size? Because I feel like that's the other thing that happened is that their portions got real small and their prices went up.
Yes. Okay, I was just going to say that too, is when I was waiting for my food to come up, there was a harvest salad on the board, and I was like, oh, well, that can't be mine because it looks too big, and I didn't order a full size, but then it was mine. So I was pleasantly surprised. I was like, wow, this is like a decent sized meal. Because I agree with you, for a while, especially the pick twos were like 4 lettuce leaves in a bowl.
Yes, it was tiny. It was, and the price went up and the size went down.
Yes, I think the prices are still up, but it's everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
well, welcome to life right now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I was pleasantly surprised. I was like, okay, Panera, you've maybe redeemed yourself. I mean, maybe it was just the location I went to.
Okay. All right.
But
I have to say, I'm still really salty about the fact that they got rid of the chicken salad sandwich, because that was my very favorite sandwich there. And I believe they had one of the best chicken salads that I've ever had. And I don't understand why they would get rid of that. So since then, I've kind of been boycotting.
Yeah.
I can't get that sandwich, but
fair. That's fair. That's fair.
But yeah,
I'm currently looking at the menu right now, and it says they have cranberry walnut chicken salad.
Okay, so that's a little bit different, but I would try it.
But maybe they're going back. Maybe they're going back.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Do you think Paneras are corporate or franchise? Do we know? Throwback to our fast food chain episode.
They're kind of specific, I think. You have to... So, like, theoretically, it looks like you can be a franchise, but you can't own a single Panera. You have to own an entire market, an entire territory. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you have to have a lot of money to get into that then.
Yeah, you have to be like a multi-unit operator.
Okay.
This says you have to commit to an aggressive development schedule, typically opening at least 15 new cafes within 6 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So apparently I guess theoretically it's franchise. That's a tough one. to get into.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
A lot harder than a McDonald's.
Right? or a Steak and Shake when they were offering for like $10,000. Like, here, take a Steak and Shake.
Yeah.
You get a Steak and Shake, and you get a Steak and Shake. I'm Katie.
And I'm Emily.
We're two long-distance best friends with a passion for learning about all the things that make everyday life interesting.
With my PhD in geography
and my master's in library science,
doing deep dives on topics is our idea of a fun time together. We'll share our findings with you on
Researching the Obvious.
So today we're going to continue on our spooky journey.
Spooky. Yes. And I can't help it. Every time I hear spooky, I need to do that. But
it's fair.
I'm excited about this one because it gives me Supernatural vibes, which the TV show, because I love Supernatural. I love Jensen Ackles. I love Jared Padalecki. I love Misha Collins. I love everything about that show.
Yes.
I nerd out about
That's
it.
Fair. That's fair.
And so, like, one of the creatures that I picked to talk about today was specifically, like, I learned about it on Supernatural. They really run the gamut with all of their creatures and beings that they encounter. So they have lots of good ones.
I've seen Supernatural, but I feel like I was more of a Charmed girl.
I think maybe I need to watch that because you've talked about it so many times. What about Buffy? Were you also Buffy or just Charmed?
No, I wasn't a Buffy person.
Yeah, I wasn't either.
Yeah, I was a Charmed person. Okay, what was going on back in that era, though, of television? Where we had early 2000s Buffy, Charmed, Angel, Supernatural. I mean, I feel like there were other ones, too, that were going
Sabrina
on.
the Teenage Witch.
I mean, the best.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're right, though. There must have been a market for it.
There must have been, because I feel like at that time frame, there were just a lot of these types of shows.
On network TV, anyway. I mean, now it's all over the place, all streaming platforms all the time. It's so, but as far as like network TV, like prime time kind of shows, there were quite a few.
Yeah, yeah. And then a little bit later, True Blood started.
Oh, yeah, True Blood. Yep.
Which I was really into. And I read the books, too.
Yeah. The Sookie Stackhouse books. Yeah. And I feel like earlier 90s too, Interview with a Vampire and Anne Rice was like so hot right now.
Oh yeah. Have you seen the new Interview with a Vampire TV show?
No, but I've heard of it and I really want to watch it.
It's really good.
Is it?
Yeah.
You like it?
Yeah. Highly recommend. I think they did.
Did you ever watch Penny Dreadful?
No, I never watched that.
Oh my. I would recommend it. It's like a very unique show. 3 seasons set in Victorian England in the spirit of the Penny Dreadful, right? Which is those books that they used to sell for a penny that were just like horror or suspense type quick reads.
Yeah.
And so the whole show is kind of like an homage to Penny Dreadfuls, but with vampires, Dracula, Frankenstein, demons, all sorts of supernatural stuff. And it's very good. So would recommend.
Yeah. It is funny to me that I feel like if you read or watch a lot of supernatural type stuff, they all kind of go into this similar lore eventually, right? So it's like all of a sudden a character appears in a specific show and they are whatever X supernatural being and you're like, oh, I know that one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I was watching Lucifer. Did you watch Lucifer?
No, I never did. But that actually, I just added that to my list because I came across it and I remember you talking about it. So that's also on my
I was
list.
watching that and then all of a sudden like Lilith appears and I'm like, oh, well, I know where this is going to go.
Yes. Lilith makes appearances in Supernatural too.
And in True Blood. And,
Yep.
Yeah.
You're right.
So it's like you eventually just start knowing all of the crossover beings and the lore and everything else if you watch or read enough about this sort of stuff.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
Yeah. So if you haven't figured out, we're going to be talking about supernatural creatures today.
Yes.
Supernatural creatures. But I would say I've been a vampire person, a vampire girly for
a long time. Yeah.
Probably because of my Hungarian ancestry.
Right. Yeah, you have a legit reason.
Yeah.
Not just because you picked up Twilight or something.
No. This predates Twilight. I mean, I read Twilight when it came out. Don't get me wrong, but
yeah,
this definitely predates Twilight. Like, I was Celine from Underworld for Halloween when that movie first came out. Oh yeah. So the vampire interest runs deep.
Yeah. And I feel like, man, they have really become a cultural fixture. If you think about all of the books and shows and stuff that just vampire craze wise, I mean, it has only grown. It's like a big business.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like vampires are one of those things that they kind of like maybe like dies out a little bit, but then back.
Yeah.
And then dies out a little bit and then comes back, you know, because you were saying like with Anne Rice, that was like a whole craze and then kind of went away a little bit. And then like True Blood and Underworld sort of came out at the same time again. And then it went away and then like Twilight and then
yeah, it's true. Yeah. It kind of but I mean overall has never really gone away.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think I've never been big on the whole vampire bandwagon. In fact, I've never read or seen Twilight. I'm actually pretty proud
watch
of that.
It. Yeah, don't watch it.
Just
painful.
Yeah, I gathered that. So I don't know. That was just never one of my big things. But I'm trying to think if there was a supernatural being that I had an affinity for. What would it be?
Yeah. Or do you identify with the hunter?
Oh, interesting question. Perhaps. Yeah, like a Van Helsing. Like I have a Van Helsing thing going on.
Yeah, right? Or just in general, like, you know, supernatural. Are you more of like the hunter?
Oh, yeah,
person?
Maybe. Maybe that's my family business.
It could be.
Actually, now that you say that, maybe that is what it is. Because also, Blade was one of my favorites.
Yeah,
also,
that's vampire
hunter. Hunter, though. Also.
Right.
I mean,
specifically.
Yeah. Maybe you've cracked that code. I don't know.
Well, this will be fun. And hopefully just a quick little dive into some supernatural creatures. And then, I don't know, I'll be curious if our listeners have other supernatural creatures that they have an affinity for. Well, since we were talking about vampires, I will just dive in to vampire lore.
Tell me what you learned.
Yes. Where did vampires come from? What are vampires? Why do they exist in the way that we know them today? Etc., etc., etc. So some of this information actually came from a vampire tour that I recently took when I was visiting Budapest. So I feel like it's pretty legit information coming direct from the source.
You were on the scene.
I was on the scene, literally standing where they imprisoned Vlad the Impaler. So, taking a full-on tour.
Woo.
So that was exciting.
Yeah, that is really cool.
It was very exciting. But some of this other information obviously has come from academic sources. So vampires, they come from folklore that existed in Balkan and Slavic communities. So primarily communities in Hungary, Serbia, Ukraine, a little bit, Turkey, this area of the world that's the Central European area of the world. And vampires as a folkloric tradition date back to very early, like the 1000s, the 1000s. What do you call that? I guess the 1000s.
The 1000s. I like that.
I
mean, you're not wrong.
Yeah, so the earliest written mention of a vampire is in 1047.
Okay.
So, you know, and the idea of vampires existing was pretty commonplace in the Middle Ages, like I said, especially in the Central Eastern European area of the world. The idea of vampires, it starts out in this like folklore tradition very differently than how we see vampires today. So I'll kind of talk about what folklore vampires were and then how we got to the image that we know them as today. So folklore vampires, they were not cute, like the opposite.
Not sparkly.
No, not seductive. Like,
not sexy.
No. They were these bloated, kind of gross looking creatures. I think the best way to describe them which is kind of gross, but is like after a body has been dead for a while and then it kind of gets bloated and purplish and whatever and sort of decomposing a bit. Like that's what they look like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gross.
So not great. Yeah. Kind of nasty. And they did suck on blood, right? They drank people's blood. And the idea was that they basically were kind of haunting you. So if you noticed a lot of, illness or something happening in your family, or if you found some dead cows or dead chickens or something like that on your property, then you might say there's a vampire lurking around that's like terrorizing our family. And so in the old traditions, the way that you would rid yourself of this vampire is you would try to figure out who the vampire was. So it was someone that had recently died that was coming back to drink your blood or haunt your family or whatever. And what you would do is then you would search for that vampire by digging up the dead bodies. And then once you found the body, you would look for visible signs of whether or not it was a vampire. And to them, visible signs were anything out of the ordinary. So let's say that the person died 4 months ago and you dug up the body and their body didn't show any signs of decomposition yet. You'd be like, oh, weird. Why isn't this body decomposing? It must be because it's a vampire.
Okay.
Yeah. Or like other signs could be like blood in the corner of the corpse's mouth or like things like this. And so once you found the body of the vampire, then you would either cut off its head and take the head and burn it, or you would drive a wooden stake through the heart of the corpse.
Just to make sure that they were
truly fully dead, and then, rebury it. Whatever, right? So that's sort of the original idea of vampires as this like being that would haunt you for whatever reason.
So were they in the habit of just digging up corpses to check on them?
Yes, this was like...
Really?
Yes, this was a very common practice.
Okay.
And much of what we know about this vampire lore was transmitted by this guy, Dr. Johann Lückinger. But he traveled to this part of Europe in the early 1700s, and he wrote like an entire pamphlet about the practice and removal of vampires. He published that in 1732. And so he was traveling to this area of Europe and he observed this whole tradition of digging up corpses and staking them and everything else. And he wrote about it in this book. And then that went and traveled back to the rest of Europe. Basically, what happened was that, if we want to get into the history a little bit, I learned way too much about this history when I was on my trip. But Austro-Hungarian Empire, right, the Habsburg Empire, they acquired what is now Hungary and Transylvania and parts of Serbia from the Ottoman Empire in the early 1700s. And so when they acquired that part of the world, it was like new and coming from the Turks. And so it was like this wild, crazy country. And so that's why Dr. Johann Flukinger went over there and was like, what is going on with these people that we've just acquired? And then that's why he wrote about this whole practice during that time. What's kind of nuts, though, is that after he sent this information back to the rest of Europe, there was this huge period of vampire hysteria that broke out at that time that was kind of like the witch trials that had happened like 100 years earlier. And so there was this crazy situation that happened where people were getting accused of being vampires, so much so that the Empress of the Habsburg Empire at the time, Maria Theresa, she passed a law in the mid 1700s that banned the exhuming of graves.
Yes, let's just stop checking on those corpses.
Yeah, because basically everyone started going through this whole hysteria situation about vampires. And so she was just like, no, we got to cut this out. You can no longer dig up any graves. And that's kind of what ended the hysteria. Anyway, this is how we first understood vampires to be. But then it slowly permeated out of this area of the world from, the early 1700s until later. And then it was in 1897 that Bram Stoker writes the book Dracula. And that book is really sort of what created vampires how we understand them today as these aristocratic creatures of the night, like suave, sort of like, I don't know. They have like a certain quality.
Je ne sais quoi.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, they live in castles. They're usually like wealthy, aristocratic people. And
yes.
Yeah, and they can turn into bats and
capes.
Yes, have capes. And so where that idea comes from, it is rooted in this folklore. So Bram Stoker, he was doing research on folklore of Central and Eastern Europe. And as he was doing this research, he came across a real person called Vlad the Impaler. And he did base a lot of Dracula on that actual person, as well as the folklore of this area. So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Vlad the Impaler. His official name was Vlad Draculia, and Draculia was a title. So he lived between 1448 and 1477 in Wallachia, which is like in Hungary, Transylvania area. And at that time, Hungary was sort of the border between the Ottoman Turks and like the Christian Europe, like kind of like armies that were developed to serve as like this border patrol situation between Christianity and Islam. And one of those groups was the Order of the Dragon, Draculea. And so Vlad, who was a count, he took on this title, Vlad Draculea, because he was Vlad of the Order of the Dragon to be protecting this whole situation. But he was very bloodthirsty. And his favorite way of killing his enemies were to stake them through their head, like impale them on stakes outside of his castle. Yeah. So anyway, so when Bram Stoker is writing his book Dracula, he learns about Vlad Draculea and he uses his name, Dracula, and sort of the idea that he was aristocratic and a count and lived in a castle. He takes that and then he blends it with the folklore that was existing there of vampires and bloodsuckers and, needing to sleep in a coffin and needing to be like staked in order to be killed and like all this stuff. And he blends that together. So that's kind of where we first see the idea of modern Dracula. And then really what solidified vampires in the way that we understand them now is the movie Dracula, where a Hungarian actor, Bela Lugosi, he plays Count Dracula in that movie. And because he was actually Hungarian and had a little bit of a difficulty speaking English, the way that he talks and his accent and everything in the movie is his real cadence and all of this. So this is where we get this idea of like, I want to suck your blood. Yeah. Right? And like, that's all him being an actor from Hungary and from this area of the world where all this myth is coming from. And so it was really the way that he portrays Bram Stoker's Dracula that we get kind of this modern version of how vampires are, which I thought was kind of cool. But really, like, the original vampires of legend are more like, I don't know if you saw Nosferatu, but yeah, they're really more like the Nosferatu guy where he's just like kind of gross and creepy and bald and like, I highly recommend that film if you haven't seen it. It's like basically an homage to the original Nosferatu from 1922. But that's where we basically get Dracula, the movie, is essentially where we get the idea of modern vampires from. Fun fact, though, which I didn't even think about, some researchers were trying to understand where the myth and the folklore of vampires came from originally, and they think that it stemmed actually from encounters with rabies. Okay. Yeah. So if you look at rabies symptoms, it includes things like insomnia and aversions to light and water. And also rabies typically is transmitted through biting, a lot of times from bats.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, from bats or wolves. And also apparently in Europe, there was a very large rabies outbreak in the early 1700s, which is the same time that all of this vampire hunting trial stuff was going on.
Well, you know what they should have done? They should have had a fun run for rabies.
Obviously.
They should have.
That would have cured everyone from all vampiric stuff.
Tino. to raise some money.
Yeah.
To cure rabies.
For rabies. Yep.
There's our Office reference for this episode.
Exactly. But so I thought that was interesting is that a lot of scholars, they basically say that the understanding of vampires was a way of people understanding decomposition of bodies, because when they exhumed a corpse, if it had blood in the corner of its mouth, that happens naturally when bodies decompose.
But they didn't know that.
So it was like their way of understanding decomposition, but then also potentially their way of understanding what rabies was doing to people.
Yeah, interesting.
Which is
I just think it sounds like a lot of work to be digging up bodies all the time, but
okay. Right? And then staking them, and then yeah. In the movie Nosferatu, they do a little bit of an homage to Johann Flukinger, because there's this guy that kind of goes to Romania and like watches this practice back in the day.
Yeah. Dracula always makes me think of my Victorian literature class in college, because one of our test questions, our essay test, was to compare Mina Harker, which is the female character in Dracula, to Hermione from Harry Potter. And because they kind of have similar roles, the smart female who's kind of responsible for helping out the heroes or whatever. And she's like very bookish. And so I always remember that question. And just the general discussion around Dracula. It's a very interesting piece of literature.
Yeah, it definitely reshaped the whole folklore, though, because of just the way that it made vampires into these wealthy, land-owning, aristocratic
instead of just like
people.
Basically a walking corpse, right?
Yeah, basically. That was like terrorizing you for whatever reason and making your family sick.
Yeah. Very interesting. As I said, I chose at least one of my creatures based on a supernatural episode. From season 1, Sam and Dean encounter a Wendigo.
Oh,
and yes. And so I've heard of these before. Like I've heard them mentioned in passing, and then obviously from the show. But I was kind of curious to dig into a little bit more of like where they came from and where the mythology originates. So the Wendigo is from Algonquin folklore. So that would be Native American tribes that existed in what's now northern Minnesota, Canada, and the Great Lakes forested region.
Okay.
And that includes multiple tribes of Native Americans, but it's everyone who spoke Algonquin. That's where the myth exists. And basically what a Wendigo is a malevolent spirit or being that is cannibalistic and can possibly possess humans, in turn driving them to cannibalism or other acts of evil.
Ew.
I found this really good description of a Wendigo, so just so that we can get the full effect of what you're supposed to be imagining here for your nightmares. So I found this quote from an Ojibwe teacher and scholar from Ontario, and I just thought it was a very good description for a mental picture. So it says, the Wendigo was gaunt to the point of emaciation, its desiccated skin pulled tightly over its bones, with its bones pushing out against its skin, its complexion the ash gray of death, and its eyes pushed back deep into their sockets.
Ew.
The Wendigo I know, right? The Wendigo looked like a gaunt skeleton recently disinterred from the grave. What lips it had were tattered and bloody, unclean, and suffering from suppuration of the flesh. It gave off a strange and eerie odor of decay and decomposition, of death and corruption.
Ew. I kind of feel like it's like the original vampire too, though.
I mean,
where it's
similar,
like decaying.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, decaying.
Ugh.
So the other thing that I was reading is that because these are evil figures that are cannibalistic and they're kind of considered insatiable, right? Like they're always looking to be consuming human flesh, or, you know, I'll talk about like metaphorically too, but that they are super thin and emaciated, but at the same time still always hungry to the point where they've eaten away their own lips. So that's why the lips are tattered and bloody and stuff. So like, they have a hunger that cannot be satisfied. Yeah.
Ew.
I know, right? Yeah, they're real
kind of like a zombie situation.
Yes, yeah, a little bit, and a little bit of like vampire vibes.
Yeah,
and so they've actually become this kind of symbol, or maybe even a cautionary tale in Native American culture of greed, gluttony, general excess. Any kind of unsatisfiable urge. That's supposed to be what the Wendigo kind of personifies. There's this thing called Wendigo psychosis, which is highly debated in the actual psychiatric community, but it's a phenomenon that has happened in Native American tribes where people have been driven to cannibalism. Now, this could be in part due to the fact that these tribes live in very harsh conditions in those northern woods. And during the winter, when food sources were scarce and famine was a real possibility, that there may have been cases where cannibalism happened. But what I read was that the Wendigo psychosis is specifically when cannibalism happens and there are alternative food sources available, and they kind of use it as the Wendigo spirit possessed me, and that's why I felt like I needed to do what I did. Yes. There's actually a really famous case of this guy. His name was Swift Runner, and he was in the Cree tribe. He took his family of 6 children and his wife out into the woods in the winter to forage and hunt for food sources, which was not uncommon for them, like during this time, right? That's a lot of families would do that, go out into the wilderness and basically are trying to secure more food for the winter. But instead, he ended up, his oldest son died, and he ate him, and then he ended up killing his wife and his other children, and also consumed that. And he confessed to all of this, supposedly. Yeah, and the thing about this case too was that there was I think a fort or some kind of settlement within 20 miles of where they were. So if they were in dire straits, it would have been feasible to like make their way to a place where they could have gotten food. And so that's why they say this one was an example of quote unquote Wendigo psychosis. So yeah, and anyway, again, hotly debated in the psychiatric community. I don't think we're actually talking about diagnosing like a mental illness here or something, but I think it just goes to show you how much that mythology or that folklore is embedded into those Native American tribes. And metaphorically speaking, the Wendigo is seen as an embodiment of selfishness, greed, kind of going to these extremes to obtain things that then eventually becomes evil and like eats away at you, literally. Right. Really, really nightmarish looking too.
Yeah. I think it's interesting how today scholars are using modern like medicine and science to go back to some of these like folklore traditions to look at why they may have developed from like a medical standpoint, which I think is kind of fascinating. Hey, Katie, remember that time that we wanted to start a podcast based on all of our random research conversations?
Yeah, and we had no idea what we were doing or how we would even make a podcast.
Yeah, that's the time. It was a really good thing we found Podbean, because that made it super easy to upload all of our episodes to multiple streaming platforms.
Podbean is a really simple platform for hosting and publishing your podcast.
So, if you and your best friend are having random conversations that you think should be a podcast, check out Podbean.
And if you do, use our link to get a month free. Podbean.com/obvious. That's PODBEAN.com/obvious.
And become super cool podcasters like us.
World famous.
So it's interesting you mentioned cannibalism, because I also looked up werewolves. And
really? Do they have a cannibal thing going on as well?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. So if you thought vampire lore was old, werewolf lore is insanely old, which I had no idea. Some of the first mentions that we see of the idea of people turning into wolves actually date back to the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Oh, wow.
Which is one of the first written texts ever.
Yeah.
So that's like one of the first mentions we see of people turning into wolves, but it was really common for Greek historians and geographers to talk about people turning into wolves. So Herodotus and Pliny the Elder and a few other Greek folks also wrote about people that could turn into wolves. And continued mentions of werewolves are found all throughout European medieval literature. So during the Middle Ages, same kind of time frame that vampires are being talked about. And especially in Germanic tribes. So tribes that would have been found in what is today present-day Germany, but also in the UK and in Ireland and in Nordic Norse stuff as well. So how do people become werewolves? Throughout antiquity, there was a variety of ways that people could become werewolves. Early accounts in the Greek times, they would have said that people were either cursed by a god, and so therefore having to live in wolf form. So there's a pretty well-known story of Zeus having cursed a certain person, and he had to then live his life as a wolf. Sometimes in early Christian accounts, you see saints cursing people, and then they have to live their lives as wolves. So apparently saints had the same capabilities as Zeus to turn people into wolves.
Okay.
But also people believed that some people who were excommunicated from the church would have to live as werewolves, which I don't know. It's just fascinating to me that people are living as wolves if they're rejecting Christianity, I guess. Some other ways people could become a werewolf were usually associated with witchcraft. So they could drink a potion that would make them a werewolf, or they could take off all their clothes and then don like a belt or a scarf or another object that was made of wolf skin, like wolf pelt situation, and that would turn them into a werewolf. So basically, you were either cursed by a god or a saint to be a wolf, or you were doing witchcraft or putting on like a wolf skin, and that would turn you into a wolf.
Oh my God, I can't wait to tell you about my next thing.
So excited.
Anyway, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So there were some groups of people who claimed that they would become wolves on purpose for the purpose of fighting warrior type situations. So especially like the Turks or the Vikings, they would don wolf pelts to turn themselves into wolves for fighting purposes. And in some of these really old accounts, it says that they actually turned into wolves. But, you know, did they actually turn into a wolf, or was it sort of a metaphorical transition for fighting purposes?
We'll never know.
We'll never know.
We'll never know.
Right. But then some people, particularly within the folklore that is found in the Bavaria region, they would become wolves in order to terrorize people and satisfy their taste for flesh.
Okay.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yes. So starting in the 15th century, there were a series of werewolf trials, again, similar to witch trials that happened in Europe, especially, like I said, in that area of Bavaria, probably because that area of Europe was the most heavily forested area for a very long time. And that's where you were more likely to encounter wolves, period. Right. But they held werewolf trials starting in the 15th century. And these werewolf trials in Bavaria actually continued as late as the early 1800s. So until the early 1800s, you could still be accused of being a werewolf in Bavaria.
Okay.
Yes.
How did they execute them?
Yes. And sometimes very gruesomely.
Okay.
One of the most famous werewolf trials was of this guy called Peter Stump, which some listeners may have heard of Peter Stump because he's sort of entered the lexicon of folklore in a lot of ways. He is featured in some metal bands' songs and stuff like this, because the trial of Peter Stump became very well known. That happened in 1589. And it was essentially like what you were talking about with the Swift Runner, like Wendigo trial. Like he cannibalized quite a few people in his town and his family members.
Oh my gosh.
and fully admitted to it.
Yeah.
Like,
it's so bizarre.
Yeah, like fully admitted to it.
The guy that I was talking about too just like came back and confessed and was like, yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah. And so the way that they executed him was really gruesome. They tied him to a wheel and like tore his body apart and then cut off his head and then put his head on a pike in front of the whole town for people to like be warned against being a werewolf, I guess.
Yeah, who's the real monster now? Damn.
Yeah, so that was pretty rough. But prior to the 1800s, people did also think that you could potentially cure being a werewolf. So sometimes you were put on a trial if you did really heinous things, but sometimes you could just be cured. And so the way that you would cure werewolves in medieval Europe, well, the Greeks thought you could cure werewolves by exerting a lot of physical activity. So they'd make them like run around like a crazy person and like wear them out. And that apparently cured you from being a werewolf.
Okay.
Got your energy out or something. And then in medieval Europe, you could do an exorcism. You could convert them to Christianity because, you know, if they'd been excommunicated or whatever, I guess just convert them back and it's fine.
Yeah.
And then you could also use wolfsbane, like the plant, to make like a little potion or whatever out with the wolfsbane plant. And that would cure people from being a werewolf.
Familiar with that one.
Yes. So werewolf lore is just basically very old. Kind of like vampires, though, the modern depiction of werewolves comes from theater, essentially. It comes from the movies. So the first depiction of a werewolf in a movie was The Wolfman, and The Wolfman was in 1941. And so that was the first kind of depiction. And then in the 1943 movie Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, that was the first movie that showed the full moon causing a transformation. Because prior to this, people could just turn into a werewolf whenever they wanted to eat a person or fight a person, I guess.
Right. Or weren't being Christian enough.
Yeah. Or were cursed by Zeus. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that movie was the first one that showed the moon as causing a transformation, and then the whole like silver werewolves being susceptible to silver.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, that happened. That was in some accounts that were written by people who went to Bavaria in like the 1800s. They said a town like saved themselves from this werewolf by shooting him with a silver bullet. But if you read the actual account, it sounds more like the town didn't have bullets, and so they melted their silver to make a bullet, because it was like, oh, the town was saved because someone thought to melt all of their silver and turn it into a bullet and then shoot it. So I'm like, did they just not have bullets and silver was what they had on hand and that's how they created a bullet? Or was it because it was silver? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But so that's like a more recent lexicon as well. What is kind of different about werewolves is that they are pretty much always portrayed as a working class monster.
As opposed to the aristocratic cape-wearing vampires.
Correct, right? They're usually portrayed as more working class and like lower socioeconomic status.
A little rough around the edges.
Kind of, right? Like wolfy and, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, werewolf lore, if you want to know more about werewolves, there is so much out there that I didn't even realize because I didn't know werewolf tales went back as far as they did. So,
well, I'm excited now to tell you about my other creature because it actually reminds me of your werewolf lore. So a little bit. Yeah. So the other supernatural being that I wanted to look up is skinwalkers. Which turns out is also a Native American myth. I didn't even do that on purpose. These were just the two that I was interested in, but then I realized that they're both Native American. But this would be the Navajo, so southwestern United States Native tribes. So a skinwalker in Navajo folklore is basically a witch that uses their powers for evil and can possess or turn themselves into an animal. So kind of a shape-shifting situation. The kind of the antithesis of the medicine person in their culture, which would be someone who has gone through this long tradition of learning and wielding knowledge to heal people and perform like spiritual ceremonies and things like that. So a skinwalker would be one of these people who acquired this power and then decided to use it for malevolent purposes or evil purposes. So kind of, I don't know, it was kind of giving me like witch doctor vibes.
Yeah, that's what
like,
I was just going to say, like
about
a witch doctor or like a trickster kind of situation.
Yeah, exactly. They did mention tricksters as well, that sometimes these skinwalkers would turn into an animal like a coyote, which is considered a trickster. animal in their culture. But before we get to that, how do you become a skinwalker? What is the origin story?
Mm-hmm.
So, to become a skinwalker, someone must be initiated by committing a deeply malevolent act. Specifically, they mention killing a close family member, but really murder or anything that could be considered truly evil and, for that matter, antisocial too. So going against the community values. And that's something that's mentioned as well, is that skinwalkers are representative of kind of the antithesis of the values of the Navajo culture. So a skinwalker is basically someone who goes against all of that in order to gain this witchcraft power. Skinwalkers are often depicted as coyotes, wolves, foxes. So when you mention the trickster animals, those would be them. And the name Skinwalker comes from the practice of wearing the skins of the animals into which they transform. So for that reason, I read Navajos actually consider it a big taboo to wear the pelt of any predatory animal, and really pelts in general. Though I did read that they might use sheepskin or buckskin if they were going to wear something. But other than that, you should not be wearing like a wolf skin or anything along those lines. And that is definitely the mark of a skinwalker. And so what it comes down to is a skinwalker is really just an evil human / witch. And they've leveraged these animal skins through their sorcery or witchcraft to then be able to shapeshift into that animal. So that's like their main ability, is to become that animal. So anyway, when you mentioned wearing the pelts of wolves and stuff, so this is another theme that comes with the skinwalkers. And like I said, in turn, making it in Navajo culture something that you do not do. You're not supposed to do.
Yeah, interesting.
I read as far as what skinwalkers look like, they're basically humans who have been corrupted or turned into this evil doer, but they can turn into animals, obviously. And then they also said that they can be identified because when they're in animal form, their eyes look very human, but when they're in human form, their eyes look like animal eyes. So that's kind of one of the ways that you would identify them, I guess. And skinwalkers, in the lore, they have the ability to potentially control other people's minds, manipulate actions. They could cause disease, death, other forms of destruction. So natural occurrences that would be like disastrous or things like that might be blamed on a skinwalker. And I also read that the actual skinwalker myth in Navajo culture, there's not a ton known about it because they don't talk about it to people outside of the tribe. So I will say that I was able to gather some information. I don't know the extent, though. Like that might just be scratching the surface because...
Or even how accurate it might be if...
Exactly. Because, they've kept it very internal to their culture, and they don't, as a general rule, talk about it to people outside of the tribe, citing things like just not really understanding the full cultural context that the myth exists in, and therefore it's just not to be discussed with people outside the tribe. So I will say, like, little disclaimer is that, yes, I got some information from the interwebs about this, but I don't know how well it aligns with actual true Navajo myth, and that there may be things that are missing from this that are very important, or really only understood if you're part of their culture or have like a deeper knowledge of their culture. Also, just a little side note, I don't know if you've heard of a little place called Skinwalker Ranch. You heard of Skinwalker Ranch?
I have.
So that was the other thing I came across. Skinwalker Ranch, for those who don't know, is a property in Utah that has become a site for many phenomena, unexplained. A lot of UFO sightings, unexplained lights, crop circles, grass circles, all sorts of crazy stuff. Also strange creatures that have been encountered, creatures that have seemingly disappeared into thin air, cattle mutilations that were very strange as well and very specific. And so the ranch has been given the nickname Skinwalker Ranch because it exists in an area of Utah that is adjacent to or like near Navajo land. And there's been some reference to that it's Skinwalker territory that they might be, traveling through there. But aside from that, then also it has become this well-known site of just lots of UFO and extraterrestrial type phenomenon that cannot be explained. Ugh, gives me the creeps, but it's still really interesting. Yeah. So there's a History Channel show called The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch that goes, I think, into more of that. Obviously, people have reported a lot of things, but, as to whether or not any of it's been proven, I don't know. But there's a lot of unexplained stuff that's been going on there. So
creepy.
I know, right?
Creepy. It's crazy, unbeknownst to us, I guess, we kind of picked two very separate regions of the world to look at creatures, but there are kind of weird parallels. So
yes,
it's like
I was thinking
people
that too.
using supernatural creatures to explain these sort of cultural oddities or cultural phenomenon that were maybe unexplainable before.
It also seems to me that there's an element of otherness and people who have separated themselves from a cultural mentality or a way to kind of ostracize. Just like the witch hunts kind of thing, which, by the way, also something I don't have a ton of information on, but there was a Navajo witch purge of 1878. So also a situation where finger pointing and calling people witches or skinwalkers or whatever. And that was a phenomenon as well. So when you were talking about it, I was like, this is so weird because I'm talking about in the United States, in America, native cultures, native indigenous cultures, and you're talking about Europe, the other side of the world, and there's these weird parallels that exist. Yeah. This common thread a little bit.
So it's these things are kind of explaining maybe, like you were saying, some phenomenon about otherness or outsiders or whatever. And the last thing I'll mention kind of quickly here is I also looked up why vampires and werewolves hate each other.
Ooh, yes. Tell me.
Because I feel like recently there's all of this stuff about vampires and werewolves being at war together, right? You've got True Blood, they're at war, Underworld, they're at war, even for
What We Do in the Shadows.
What We Do in the Shadows, right? They're at war with the so I was like, what is the deal here? And basically what I found is that similar to some of these other societal things that supernatural creatures are explaining, maybe the whole vampire werewolf situation, it's almost like a commentary on social classes and the dynamic that exists between rich versus poor, light versus dark, civilized people versus the wild people. Yeah. Because if you think about the way that vampires and werewolves are portrayed in contemporary society, it's in some ways you have the civilized, wealthy vampire that lives in the dark compared to the scruffy, lower socioeconomic
brutish
status, brutish, wild, that lives in the light kind of werewolf thing. But that whole dynamic didn't even start until, again, movies in the 1940s. In House of Frankenstein in 1944 and its sequel, The House of Dracula in 1945, those films showed werewolves and vampires existing together. Then in 1948, there was a horror comedy, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Okay. I remember Abbott and Costello.
Yes. So they made one about meeting Frankenstein, and it portrayed a werewolf teaming up with the bumbling baggage clerks to fight off a vampire. So you kind of have the werewolf being portrayed as like a friend of the working class man to like go and combat this like evil, conniving, wealthy vampire situation. And then in the 1970s, the Gothic soap opera Dark Shadows, that was like really the first one also that brought in this whole werewolf storyline as a counterpart to the vampire aristocracy. Later in Buffy, but then it was really Underworld in 2003 that solidified this idea that vampires and werewolves were naturally adversarial to each other. But they both come from this same place in the world, in Bavaria and Hungary and the Habsburg Empire, right? And then being these like two different sides of society. Yeah, it kind of like played off each other a little bit. So it's like still we're using these monster characters as ways to explore humanity or...
Yeah. I feel like that was also the theme of both Wendigos and Skinwalkers, is maybe it's not as much class as it is this idea of things that are not desirable or succumbing to a more evil purpose, or again, that kind of otherness of I'm not going to participate in what's good for the community or good for the group. I'm going to do these other things that are antithetical to that. And both of those figures, again, with the Wendigo kind of representing this idea of greed and gluttony. And I was reading too that it's really, as time has progressed and in literature and pop culture and things like that, it's also become this symbol even for colonialism and something that devours the culture. Just anything that it is like a malevolent force.
Right. That's like consuming.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that's powered by greed and gluttony and that feeling of never having enough. Similarly with the Skinwalkers, they talked about just that this is the representation of someone who was intended to be a good person, right? A healer, a medicine person, someone of great knowledge and respect. And they're basically the corrupted evil version of that, where they
went bad.
Yeah, they've chosen to use their powers for evil instead of good. And exploring that duality, right? Of, with that power comes great responsibility, or whatever you want to say, or like the ability to be corrupted and to be evil. Evil overtake the good. Yeah, I think it's hilarious that this is what we picked, and they're like weirdly similar.
Because even in our Halloween episode last year and talking about death traditions and stuff, I think it goes to show how much there are these similarities that exist within different cultures that developed independently of one another. And so it's like humanity just has these veins that stretch through it that are all on the same pathway in one way or another, but maybe just using different words or different references or different frames of mind, right? Like humanity really is all thinking the same in a lot of ways sometimes,
Yeah, it reminds me of The Power of Myth, right? With Joseph Campbell or whatever. He talks about just all the mythologies across the world and like the commonalities between them. And I just think it's funny because I wasn't necessarily expecting that from what I chose and what you chose. I was like, oh, these will be totally different sides of the world, totally different myths. But yeah, like you said, common themes or common veins that clearly are just what humans have in common.
Right. Yeah. Like what we all have to deal with. Yeah, exactly. Some food for thought for your Halloween night.
Spooky season. Yeah. That's right.
Embrace the humanity within all sides, the creepy side and the not creepy side.
And when you're thinking about eating that 20th piece of Halloween candy, I just want you to think of the Wendigo. Just
yeah. Beware of the gluttony.
That's right.
Thank you for listening to Researching the Obvious. To learn more fun facts about everything that we're researching, Follow us on Instagram at Researching the Obvious Pod, all one word. You can also follow us on Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you know someone that you think would enjoy listening to all of our findings, please feel free to share or give us a review. Researching the Obvious is written, produced, edited, and hosted by Emily Fekete and Katie Nakanishi. Tune in next time to hear more obvious facts.